Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today y Mañana. I'm Alex. This is Xavier. We're really excited to have you joining us on a hot morning. It is pretty warm out there here in Charlottesville, Virginia. It is definitely a café con leche morning, and you may debatably want to either have it in an air-conditioned place.
It's the caffeine there.
It's the caffeine that you want.
In that case, not just the warmth of the caffeine.
Not just the warmth, you want the caffeine. So either have it in an air-conditioned, if you're too hot, have it in an air-conditioned place. and enjoy some.
Most homes today have air conditioning, so it's no matter whether it's winter or it's summer,
you can be
inside the house is pretty comfortable.
You can be pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
So we got a great show in store for you today. I know a lot of our viewers love the finance topic, so we've got a total finance topic show today. We're going to be covering numerous things, including peak boomers and their impending retirement, the wave of boomer retirement.
Of course, yeah. Some people talk at the cliff.
Yeah, they call it the cliff. The cliff sounds a little too
I know, yeah.
dubious. You can't survive when you go to retirement as a boomer. But we'll talk boomers retiring. We'll talk 401ks. We'll talk estate planning. We're going to talk some inflation. We'll talk retirement goals, things people should be thinking about and are thinking about,
right. And
some basic terms that you may hear as you approach retirement or even as you think about it that maybe you should be aware of what they mean. Sometimes people, like we were talking before the show opening, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so we'll introduce some terms that maybe you haven't heard before or you have heard of but haven't thought to ask, what does this mean? And just kind of talk them over because we'll pick Xavier's finance brain.
Well, it's funny how you said that. So I remember once I attended one of your, I think it was in high school. Because you were homeschooling, so the teachers got together for a conference with some parents, right? And I was on the conference call. So they were talking about the fact that so many of the students didn't attend, how they had a half an hour where you can go talk to your teacher, right?
Open office hour.
And they said, so many students don't attend that. And I said, what you have to understand is that the problem is a lot of students don't really, they're probably a little intimidated to just call the teacher and say, I don't understand anything, right? It's like, I'm lost. Please go over everything again. Or two, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, so it's hard to ask. So you have to be cognizant of that. So somehow or another, you have to go out and reach out to the students and say, this is truly open for any basic question. I mean, if you're just, whatever you're struggling with, please call us, talk to us, because that's the goal. Because like I said, most, and you see that in classrooms, right? Whether in college, whatever, there's just so many students who won't raise their hands because they say, I don't want to ask this question because it's probably, 99% know it. And it's the opposite, 99% saying, thank God that guy asked the question because it's what I wanted to ask. But it's the same thing here, right? It's like you said, it's, most people don't even know how to ask the question, right? And the goal that at least we, strive for in what we do, you and I, and obviously Emergent is not just, working with people and helping them, but education. And I always tell that to people, the more we can educate, the better, because the more they know, the more our clients know, the more they can tell us, say, yeah, that's great, but how about this, or how about that, or I'm really concerned about the following. And it helps us open up the scope of what we can help them with. So that's important. Education is so important.
Absolutely. Just a couple of shout-outs before we start, of course. Love being on the I Love CVille Network presented by Emergent Financial Services. A couple of shout-outs, of course, to our partners, Matthias, Realty, Charlottesville Opera, Craddock Serious Insurance, Forward Adelante. We'll share at the end of the show some people we got. Matthias coming on next week.
Okay.
So he'll be on the 30th. So we'll be looking
and the opera's like
that.
Right around the corner, right?
It's June. Oh, you're going to see some shows.
Okay.
Probably with Nick on as well. With some opera in the coming weeks.
Was it the Music Man this year
Music Man
and Love Elixir or Elixir of Love?
Elixir of Love. Lucille D'Amour is going to be playing at the Charlottesville Opera this year. So that's some great music.
Absolutely,
and those are to, as well as the
two
festival.
Great pieces.
They have the big festival.
Oh yeah,
Festival ALL.
I gotcha.
Coming up in the summer, so a lot to
look
forward
fun
to. A lot of fun things to look forward to. UVA baseball in the ACC tournament.
So
they won yesterday. First game. So the ACC tournament pool play is kind of weird because it's a round robin.
Okay.
But high seed, if everyone ties, if everyone basically wins one, loses one, the high seed moves on.
Okay.
UVA won yesterday, but Florida State had beaten Georgia Tech
The day before.
the day before, so Georgia Tech is out because we beat Georgia Tech. So Friday's game determines who
And we
who
play
goes
Florida.
to the semifinals. We play Florida State. Whoever wins goes to the semifinal of ACC tournament. The
Okay.
thinking is if we go to the semifinal, good chance that we host a regional.
That would
in
be great.
Charlottesville, which is
That
always
would
fun.
be great. Yeah.
That's always
Yeah.
fun. Super regional would be to probably have to win the ACC to host a super regional, which is like the 2 out of 3 round to be at home.
Gotcha.
But we've won on the road before. Last year we won on the road, I believe.
Yeah.
Super regional. So, but a
We
regional is always
we certainly
fun.
can hit. The question is, can our pitchers hold on?
We won like 13-0. So we did hit.
Wow.
We did hit. The question is whether our pitching can keep us in the game
Yeah.
against some of the better teams
Yeah.
out there, the better hitting teams.
I mean, I saw that against, I think it was Virginia Tech. We were losing 7-0, and we just
then
came
came
back.
back.
You know, I mean,
Which was
that
nice
team
to
can
see.
really.
They can hit and they're good at the comeback. They're not phased when they're down, crazy scores like 7-0.
Because you know you can hit, I guess. Because you know you can
hit your way
score
out of it,
runs.
yeah.
You got that.
Well, it's
you
one
got
thing to
that-
know you can hit and be like, 3-0 is nothing. It's another thing to know you can hit where you're like, 7-0, we can come back from this.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because we can score 13 runs in a game. So definitely looking forward to that. Nothing like beats summer baseball, postseason baseball.
Yeah, and at least now the weather, because we went to a couple of games, but one of them was a little cold out
A little
there.
chilly,
Yeah.
but
A little
now the
chilly.
weather really
Yeah.
has warmed up.
That's what you
So now
like.
those night games in particular are a lot of fun.
Yeah,
A
they
lot
are.
of fun. So
They are.
looking forward to that happening. Always good to see. UVA lacrosse is in the Final Four equivalent
Oh, really?
of that.
Okay, didn't know that either.
So that looking forward to that. I think we play Maryland is who we play. So that's
also ACC?
That's national.
That's national.
That's the Final Four
Oh, wow.
of the national lacrosse.
I didn't know we were that good.
Yeah.
I know a few years ago we won,
A few
right?
years ago, we won back-to-back. Well, back-to-back as in 2019, 2021.
Okay.
And then last couple of years, we've been beaten in the tournament. But
Okay.
we made the tournament, just got
Yeah.
beat in the tournament. This year, we'll see. We were on a little losing streak to end the year, but then we won 2 in a row in the tournament. So
Okay.
we'll see what happens
Yeah, you never know.
going forward. So good to see UVA sports doing well, as always.
Definitely.
So let's jump. I say we can jump right into it. Double shout outs. Dr. Elizabeth Urpí watching the show this morning. Nicholas Urpí watching the show this morning. I'm sure he'll have
He's
some.
trying to find. He's trying to learn something. That's what
Yeah,
it is.
trying to, or either that or trick us with some questions.
Well, we just don't take his questions if they're going to trick us. That's
It's
all.
out to be like, Nicholas, what a shame I missed your question. So sorry to hear that I missed it. But be sure to send us any questions, comments you may have. We will work through them as we cover some different topics today. So I guess we kind of wanted to start with the boomers because the headline was 2/3 of peak boomers are facing a retirement cliff. But they are kind of explain to us, okay, what's this thing of boomers all retiring, and what's the cliff mean?
Well, so the boomers are, I guess, that generation, and I forget the actual years, but literally
Think 60s.
anybody turning, between 63 and older at this point, pretty much are the boomers, right? And so the question is, and I think it said that about 30.4 million Americans will turn 65 by the end of this decade, right?
Which
So
is a
that's just a lot of people retiring.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of things. One is obviously once you hit 65, right? Once you hit 62, you can take Social Security. Most people truly wait 65, 66, 67. 65
full
is
retirement
where,
age, essentially.
65, if you really want to, if you're retiring and you get Medicare, some people say, well, I'll take Social Security then also because, this way Medicare is paid
Comes out
through
of it.
Social Security, comes out of it. But 67 pretty much is full retirement age. So, that's going to put a tax, on Social Security. But the key question is, do these folks have enough assets to literally continue to live the lifestyle they were accustomed to, and two, to basically, continue to or be able even to retire? And I think the article said that I think it said 52.5% of those 30.4 million
assets of
have
$250,000
assets
or
of
less.
$250,000
Yeah.
or less.
And the problem is that's the level where essentially you will deplete those assets. In other words, the $250,000 or less cannot grow fast enough that you won't deplete it, which means you're relying on Social Security for the majority of your
Exactly. Yeah.
retirement
now,
income.
if you make the assumption that they already own their home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have no mortgage. They still have obviously the taxes to the home. They have insurance, and then you have your typical living expenses. You know, most of the time, Social Security will not cover all of that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's expected to cover.
Yeah.
It's supposed to cover 40%.
Exactly.
The issue is if
exactly.
you're using it to cover more than that, are you at risk?
Yeah, yeah, and then of course, then the question is that 250 can whatever one can generate in interest or dividends from that payment, will that suffice, or are you beginning to pull out of that 250? And if you begin to pull out of that 250, you know, how long would that $250,000 last you? You know, if you decide to retire at 65, is it going to last you 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right? So those are the questions, and I'm, you know, without any doubt, you know, 250 is not a I would say a healthy savings to retire at 65.
At 65.
You know,
yeah.
unless you're really just one of those people who like to stay home, do nothing, and you know, and
I mean, it's not impossible. I mean, let's face it, we have clients
yeah,
that essentially cover all their expenses with Social Security.
Yes.
That they pull nothing out of retirement
Yeah.
accounts, except for RMDs when the time comes, because their expenses are fully covered by Social Security. It's a combination of them having a healthy Social Security. They've worked long enough. They had good you know, basically paychecks when they were working. It's a combination of that, plus they just live very frugally.
but the other thing that one needs to also consider is how many people retire and they're still married, they still have their spouses with them. And the issue is they combine those two Social Securities, right? So they say, yeah, we're good to go. The issue is when there's just one survivor, you know, what happens then?
Yeah.
Because although
you don't get your Social Security plus your spouse's.
No, you
your
just get
spouse's
the
Social
highest of
Security
the two.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's when it really becomes sometimes a little challenging to say, yeah, this is great, but you know, when something, you know,
But let's face it,
happens
your
in the
income
future.
essentially, if one spouse passes away, your income essentially gets halved. I mean, it might be a little less than half if the spouse with the higher
Social Security
passed away.
Yeah.
It won't be half that you'll lose. It'll be a little less than half because
Right.
you'll be able to switch to theirs. But still, it's essentially a halving
Yeah.
of your
Yeah,
income.
you have to
and
almost
if you
look at
were
it as
relying on that as anywhere from 60 to 100% of your expenses, now you're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is, you know, over time, you know, most companies. I mean, the government's a little different because you do in most cases get a pension from the government, and then you also have the 403b or 401ks, depending on whether you worked also in the public area or you work in the private area. But you know, most companies do not offer pensions anymore. So your 401k is your savings. So when you retire, you know, I would say about, you know, 85% of companies don't have pension plans. So when you retire, there's no pension. It's not like you retire and say, oh, by the way, you also get a pension.
Exactly.
So that's
essentially
another thing.
what used to happen is it was invisible. In other words, your cost was invisible to you. Your savings were invisible to you because if you had a defined pension, right, the company basically just offered you less. Like, in other words, the company knew that a pension comes with this, so I would have offered you $60,000 a year. I'm offering you $55,000 a year. Because you're going to get a pension, which I need to fund, because in the future I'm going to be giving you $1,500 a month, right? Now what happens is you get the 60 a year. Your paycheck is your paycheck, but it's up to you to participate in the 401k plan. Because if you don't get a magical $1,500 a month that comes into your bank account when you retire from that company.
Yeah.
So it's you need to have made a conscious decision to put X dollars away, and if you started late or didn't do that, you now have this. 52% of Americans have $250,000 or less, which is supposed to generate what used to be a pension.
That's right.
And the problem is that's not easy to do without taking substantial risk.
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, 401ks, if you are funding them properly. So in other words, think about the example you gave. So instead of 60, right, you will get 55 because the company take 5 and put it into your savings, right? The difference is that in most cases, right, those pensions, when you retire, you had options. You could take that pension as a full pension for yourself or as a split pension where, God forbid, you passed away, your spouse would then get it, right? Of course, that would be a decreased amount on a monthly basis, right? However, when you think about 401ks, if you're smart enough, you say, okay, I'm making 60, but if I put 5 away in my 401k, the beautiful thing about that is that when you pass away, when one of the two passes away, that 401k is still there. I mean, the whole thing, whatever's left is still there. It's not like half of it.
Exactly.
And 2, God forbid, when you pass away, when the second person passes away, if there's anything left over there, it goes to your, beneficiaries, whoever they may be, right? While a pension just disappears, right?
Yeah, if you did a pension and both spouses pass away, it's gone. I mean, your kids don't inherit your pension.
Exactly.
Whereas if you have a 401k, whatever's left, your kids will inherit. So you have the opportunity with a 401k to do more. And really, a lot of it depends, and unfortunately this doesn't help the 52% that are about to be 65,
no,
right?
Of course not.
But if you are, I mean, we've done the studies. If you start at 35 and put that 6,000 away, I think we ran it with 6 away each year, right? You will easily surpass 250,000. Basic.
Yes.
10 or so years, probably at 5,000, maybe 12, 13 years, right? Somewhere between 10 to 15 years of working, putting $5,000 away, you will easily surpass $250,000. You're probably going to be closer to $450,000, right? So you will pass that $250,000 number, even if you don't start till age 35. If you start at age 25, I mean, we've run the numbers. If you start at age 25 and do this, you don't even have to be saving into your 40s. You could stop saving somewhere between 25 and 45.
Well, I think
when you have kids,
the analysis we did was we assumed that you put from 22 to 32.
We started at 22.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is you could probably say from 25, so you're a little later, right? 25 to age 40, and you will easily surpass
easily,
the 250,000.
Absolutely.
Even if you stop saving at age 40, because now you have college, you have kids.
Exactly.
In other words, so the earlier you start, you don't even have to save the entire working life. Yeah, if you start at age 40 to save in your 401k, you probably have to save until you retire. Right. But if you start earlier, you don't even have to save until you retire.
And that's the key. I mean, the key is to, and again, as we were talking about before, right? That the idea that to be able to educate people on not just saving, but budgeting. How do I budget this into my, plan so that, yes, on a monthly basis, right? Maybe it's $100, maybe it's $50, maybe it's $10, whatever it may be. If you religiously put that money away into a, whatever 401k, a 403b, an IRA, a Roth, whatever you choose, right? And the beauty about doing it into a retirement is that grows tax free. That's the whole goal, right? If you can do that, then over time, you are growing those savings to the point that you'll have something when you retire, and it's important. It doesn't catch you by surprise, right? But it's funny on the 401ks that you were talking about. There was another article which, and this one really struck me as just unbelievable, right? But I think it said that. It said that 43% of participants admitting that they were not clear about what a 401k retirement plan is. I mean, that's just amazing.
Which is a lot.
Which to me says also one thing. If you are a corporation, a company, it doesn't matter how big or small you are, right? And you have a 401k, right? You need to literally educate your employees. You owe it to your employees to once or twice a year to have a little thing at lunchtime, breakfast, after whatever it may be, to sit down and tell your employees.
And it may need to be made mandatory sometimes. We've been to a couple, right, where like you can tell that 3 out of 50 employees, show up because it was an optional lunchtime thing. But we've seen.
Well, if you give them free lunch, more than 3 show up.
More than 3 show up. If you give some free food, right? But the interesting part is, we're not going to name names, obviously, but there are large employers even here that we will get their employees and they'll be like, HR has never talked to me about, I know absolutely nothing about any, and these are big employers with numerous options as to what you do, and the employees will come to us and we're going with them through the website to find out what they're eligible for, because no one from the day they got hired has told them anything. So granted, it's people, obviously, I'm not saying people don't bear any responsibility for finding out, okay, I have a 401k, what is it, right? But it's kind of an indictment of employers too, that you have that half the workforce, almost half the workforce, has no idea what that's in a 401k has no idea what it is.
What it is, and maybe even how it works, and because the most important thing, and this is what we always tell our clients, is if your employer has a matching program, the minimum you need to put in is enough so that they match. It's literally free money, right? I mean, if they got a 3% match on your salary, and you're making $50,000 a year, right? That's $1,500.
Which, I mean, may be part of the reticence, right? In other words, depending what kind of employer you are, you're like, do I really want to overly inform my employees that I'll give them free money if they participate? But unfortunately, I think you're doing a disservice to your employees if you don't properly inform them. But I mean, maybe it's worth reviewing, because I know that article found it's like 42% don't know what a 401k is, and 35% confess to not knowing what interest is. So maybe in case any of those people are watching, what is a 401k and what is interest? You should start whichever one.
Well, what's funny about the interest though is I would suspect that if you own a mortgage, you know exactly what an interest is, because it's huge.
How does it apply to you? Like, what does it mean to get interest when you save in a retirement account?
So the interest. So when you buy investment securities, right? Most of the time these days, if you're buying a mutual fund, you buy an ETF, or if you buy stocks, right? What those stocks or ETFs or mutual funds, what they sometimes generate is called dividends, right? So in other words, whether it be on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or annual basis, a lot of the securities, a lot of stocks, a lot of companies will pay what they call a dividend. So let's say that the company says, whatever I earn, I'm going to pay 3% to stock owners, right? So if you invest $100, they're telling you, I'm going to give you $3 every single year for every $100 that you invest in my stock, right? So think about a mutual fund that has 500 of those, or 300 of those, or 1,000 of those, right? If every company is giving, some give 2%, 3%, 2%, 1%, whatever it may be. All that, right, is coming into the mutual fund, and the mutual fund distributes that in the form of dividends, right? Interest is the same thing, only it applies to bonds. So when you buy a bond, let's say you buy a 2-year bond that has interest rate of 5%. Again, you invest $100, every single year that bond is paying you $5. That's called interest. Once again, if you buy a bond fund, though, you will not see an interest in your statement. You'll see dividends, because once it turns into a mutual fund, everything is dividends. But interest and dividends are really the same thing. You go to a bank or you go buy a CD, right? And it says 4 point something. That's really truly an interest that they're giving you. And I won't go into the analysis of CDs and T-bills because it's a little different. But either way, that's the whole goal. Interest means how much you're going to receive from that investment. From the investment. Yeah.
Exactly. And compound interest, which is where I think people get tripped up, just means that interest gets more interest. So if you have 100 and you get 5% interest, you get paid $5. If you don't take the $5 out and spend it, and you leave it in the stock or the bond, right? Now next year, that $5 gets you 5% interest, which is, 25 cents, right? In other words, interest begets more interest.
Exactly.
And that's what it means by compound interest being a powerful force, because every dollar you get in interest now begins to generate interest of its own.
Exactly.
Now, 401k, Kevin Higgins, thanks for watching the show this morning, asked a great question. He says he thinks there's even more confusion, which especially I think in Charlottesville, on the difference between a 401k and a 403b. And the funny thing is, I think the reason this is confusing is because we think that there's more difference than there actually is.
Oh, yeah.
Because functionally, as far as you putting money in getting a match, it being tax-free, the beautiful part is there is no difference, right? The difference is that a 401k is a private sector for the most part, and a 403b is a public sector or nonprofit version of a 401k. But functionally, in terms of what can be offered to you and the options that you will choose from as an employee, it is going to work exactly the same way. And so I think the tricky part is, you're going to you switch from a nonprofit, or you've never had worked for a private sector, and now you don't work for a nonprofit, and you're like, 403b, what is that? Right? And then you might encounter 403b, and you can do a 457, and you're like, what the heck? What's with all these numbers? Right? Or 401a, and you're like, oh my goodness, what happens is because they're all listed by code, basically it's a tax code thing, right? It becomes confusing because you're like, how the heck does this work? But I think the easy way to do this is to kind of say, from a functional perspective, and I'll cover 457 once you finish this, but from a functional perspective, if you're encountering 401k, 403b, or 401a, as far as you, the employee, are concerned, this is going to work the exact same way. And so to give people kind of a little bit of an overview, what is a 401k?
So when you think about it, I mean, and thank you, Kevin, because it's so good to think about this. So every single one of these plans is what they call retirement plans, and the beautiful thing again about retirement plans is that it does it serves two purposes. One is it reduces your tax base. So in other words, if you're making, go back to Alex's, if you're making $60,000. And you put $5,000 into a 401k, or you put $5,000 into a 403b, or you put $5,000 into an IRA, or you put $5,000 into
457.
To a 457, right? That $5,000, right, reduces your taxable from $60,000 to $55,000. So you're only paying taxes on $55,000. The
IRA basically pretends that you didn't make the money
exactly
that you put in.
And the second part is all those funds grow tax-free. What does that mean? That means that on every single year when you're earning interest or dividends on your funds, as we mentioned, you put $100, you make $5 in a regular account, whether it be a savings account or a regular brokerage account or a CD, those $5 are being taxed. The IRS says, how much did you make this year? Oh, you made $5. Well, I'm going to take a piece of that.
I'm going to take 15%.
Yeah, I'm going to take 15, whatever your tax rate is, 12%, 15, 20, whatever that tax rate is, right? But in a retirement account, the IRS says, no problem, go ahead, reinvest it, right? Mm-hmm. And granted, when you begin to pull it out in retirement, you will be taxed on what you pull out. But those are the two key elements, right? But so once again, so whether it be a 401k or 403b, right? A 401k is a retirement plan that typically most companies or corporations will provide you. And then some small companies may have a thing called Simple, and that's because they may be a smaller company and that's easier for them, cheaper, less complicated. Some other companies may have a SEP plan. These are all retirement plans, right? But the 401k just simply...
the most common problem, especially if you're working for a larger company.
If there's, let's say 10 or 15 or more employees, the chances are there's going to be a 401k plan. And so that simply means that there's an administrator, and then you have to fill out the paperwork and say, yeah, please take out, 1% of my salary, 2% of my salary, whatever it is, right? And again, if the company's matching 3% of your salary, but you have to put at least 3% to match, please put 3% if you can. And I know sometimes it's hard. 3% of your salary into that retirement plan, and it gets pulled out of your paycheck on every single time there's a paycheck.
That's one of the keys, I think, to mention.
Yes.
Is that if people have done an IRA before, they've probably been used to, you get your paycheck, and then at some point you go and stick money in, you move money from your bank account to your IRA. 401k is a salary deduction, meaning whatever you choose to put in, it's not going to come into your bank account and then go to your 401k. It will never come into your bank account. It'll be deducted from your paycheck and put automatically into your 401k. So you will get some kind of login from your employer for you to see what's going into your 401k account, because it's not going to come to your bank account. If your paycheck would have been $2,600 and you say take $200 a month out, right? Your paycheck's going to be $2,400. It's going to be $2,400, and $200 before it ever hits your bank account is going to go into the 401k.
And just a quick funny story. I remember once we had we provided 401ks to all employees, and we sat down, and I sat down with this gentleman who happened to be Spanish, so they said, you need to talk to this gentleman because he's Spanish. I said, no problem. So I spoke to him, and he said, I just I barely meet my bills and stuff. I said, listen, I understand. I said, but why don't we do this, right? Why don't we try to put, let's say $50 a month, and see where we go from there, and if you can do it. And he says, okay. So we put $50 a month. So about 3 months down the line, he gives me a call. He says, there's something wrong. I said, well, what's the problem? He says, they're not, you said you're not pulling my $50 out of my check. I said, well, let me check. So I go look. I look at his pay stub. I said, yes, they are. You're pulling it? I said, yeah. And so I showed him. I said, look, see your 401k? It's got $150 in there, right? He goes, oh, I didn't even know. He said, can you take another 50? So it's funny because most people, think, I can't afford it. But sometimes you just have to tell them, let's just start slowly. Let's see what happens. Because what happens is we don't.
You adjust
it's budgeting. You adjust. It's like my paycheck says I'm now making $2,000. So I only have $2,000 to spend. If it was $1,900, I only have $1,900 to spend, right? Granted, I understand sometimes, my mortgage and my food.
Yeah, if my mortgage is $1,800, I can't.
Exactly. There's only so much.
$100, yeah.
But the point is, again, it's education and it's sitting down, when you can. And this is again, and this is part also of the provider of the 401k, being able to sit down with people, right, and say, let's review this. Let's see what you can do. Let's see how much you can put away. And let's make sure we get all the paperwork set up, right?
Exactly.
And then the second thing is the investment options in 401ks can sometimes be somewhat difficult, right? Most people's I have no idea what this is.
And literally, look, we're not huge fans of the target date. If you see target date and it has a year, and that's your investment, what that means is it's a robot, right? It's a robot that is put together a combination of things, and whatever the year is on after the words target date, if it's not a year, that's the year you're expected to retire. Exactly. It's probably the year you turn 65.
Yeah.
Right? So somewhere between 59 and 65, right? Yeah. And that's what it is. Yeah. And look, if you've got literally no idea what you're doing, and you...
Well, even if you start, let's be honest. If you start with $50, $100,
just let them do that,
yeah.
right? When it gets big enough, yes, you can do better, and you should talk to someone, a financial advisor, right? But don't do nothing because you're like, Xavier, now they don't like target date funds, so I'm just gonna leave it in cash, right? Don't do nothing.
Put it in the S&P 500 or something.
Put it in the S&P 500, or just let it ride there, because at least they will grow something. It's not as though a target date fund doesn't grow. Could it grow better? Possibly, right? But it's not like it won't grow at all. So you're earning something. And the key thing is, like Xavier said, the defining feature of a 401k is that there is what's called the match.
Yeah.
Meaning almost every corporation that has a 401k, if you put X percent of your paycheck, they will match that percent up to a certain number. And whatever that number is, we recommend do that number.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if it's outrageous, if you're lucky enough that your company will match 10% of your paycheck and you can't afford 10%, fine, right? But for most people, it's going to be somewhere between 1 and 4.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And whatever that number is, that's
0 and 4.
0 and 4. Yeah, it might be half. We've seen half, right? But in other words, if they say we'll match 1%, that means if you put 1% of your paycheck into the 401k, they're going to put another 1%. That doesn't come out of your paycheck. It's just free money. Yeah. And just put that in there.
So that $50 you just put in looks like 100 when you go look at your statement. It's 100. Well, how did the 100 get there? That's the employer.
Exactly. Yeah. One of our topics we were going to cover was kind of problems and growing things among older Americans. But I want to transition into that by asking, just we've talked about what people can do kind of on the back end to avoid the cliff. What are some things that might be available to people? What should you be looking at if, you are that person who's 55 and you have less than $250,000 of assets, right? there are some things that the IRS does for you in terms of catch-ups and so forth. What are things people should be doing if you are the person who's 55 and you don't yet have $250,000 in assets?
Well, one of the things that I think is critical, and I try so hard to tell people to do this, and I know sometimes it can be expensive depending on who you go to, but to really run a financial plan, a retirement plan, financial plan, they're kind of the same thing. Once you get to that age close to retirement, we call retirement plan because most people feel comfortable. Financial plan, if you're in your 30s, it's a financial plan.
Yeah,
you want to know when can I retire, right? But the reason is that it really begins to kind of, in a straightforward way, give you an idea as to how much and how long those assets are going to last you, right? In other words, and sometimes, again, it helps with the budgeting process because it's uncanny how many times we sit there and we tell people, yeah, just tell us, what your utilities are, what your expenses are, how much you spend on food, gasoline, insurance, and whatever. And they sit there and they're kind of like, wow, okay, I'm really have to look at that because they don't have a clue, right? And
they're like, oh man, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. In other words, I'm using up all my income each month. And then we'll add all those things up and we're like, there's like $1,000 left over. And they're like, oh man, where is it? And then of course you start searching, right? Amazon, Netflix, streaming. Oh, I forgot this. Oh, I forgot that. You'd be surprised, when you whittle down to the utility stuff, the stuff you need to live, it isn't as much of your monthly expenses as you think it is. And you're like, because we'll see it. We'll run the number and be like, this is literally everything you guys gave us. And it's added up. And they're like, I spend more than that each month.
Exactly.
And we're like, so we're missing something.
Absolutely. Is it? No. Because we tell them, at the end of the year, you should have, $10,000 left over. And they say, no, that's impossible. We just don't do that. So, well, then the numbers you gave us are wrong. They look, no, that's right. So it's like, okay, there must be, maybe I am spending a little too much on X, Y, or Z, right? But so that really becomes helpful because, and it's funny because I think one of the articles indicated that I think only about 26% of people take advantage of that, right? And it's so critical because, again, as we mentioned, it makes you begin to think about what you're spending your funds in, where you are in life, Sometimes it's like, I want to go more on vacation. Well, that's expensive. So where does that come from? Can you do that? And there was one article that I read that mentioned the fact that when you think of retirement, you should think of retirement in kind of phases. In other words, and I mean, they were a little early, but in the sense of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. In other words, there are some people that's like, I don't want, I'm just saving. So when I retire, I can have fun. It's like, you know what? It's nice to have fun a little bit when you're 30 and 40 and 50 because you never know when you hit 70. It's like,
right? Post 65, it's the go phase, the slow go phase, and the no-go phase. And
right.
So what happens is people, I think that's what happens. People think of it as like, oh man, I'm just going to travel all the time in retirement. So I'm going to save all my money now, and at 65, I'm just going to travel for the rest of my life, right? Yeah. And the issue is that the dodo phase, which is when you're traveling in retirement, it's probably from age 65 to 75. Because after 75, what happens is...
The point was that even then, right, even then, the issue is, and you know that, well, my knees are hurting me, my back hurts, and I can't eat this, I can't eat that. So, you go into Europe or whatever, it's like, oh man, I'd love to eat that, but when I was 30 and 40, I could eat that, but I can't eat that anymore, right? So, so the issue is, it's nice to begin to plan early if you can, right? But the goal is to say, all right, let's figure out what you want to do, what you like to do over the next 5-10 years,
exactly,
and then so on.
But in other words, what I'm saying is that if you've got a $10,000 a year for the rest of my life for all retirement vacation fund, right? Odds are you're not using that $10,000 a year at age 86.
No, of course not.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen, right? What's going to happen is, for a certain number of years, you're going to spend, you're going to use 10 or more on vacation, right? And then it's going to switch, and you're going to be spending money on medical expenses, but you're not going to be spending the vacation thing. Right. So you don't have to put a financial planner will work with you to say you don't have to put both those in. You don't need to put $10,000 a year ad infinitum for vacation and $10,000 a year forever in medical expenses.
Exactly.
Because you're probably not going to have all of those simultaneously. You're going to have a period in which you're vacationing a lot, And then you're going to have a period where you're like, all right, I'm staying home, right? But that's probably also the period in which you're going to be like, okay, I have this ailment. I have to go to the doctor for this. I need I need knee surgery or something, right? So you're going to have other expenses, but you might not have them all simultaneously forever.
That is correct. Yeah. Yeah. And again, a good financial planner will look at things like that and say, let's plan for over the next 10 years. Yeah, you're going to go on vacation more often than not. But then thereafter, the chances are you're slowing down, but there's going to be other expenses. So let's add that. So again, when you can do that, whether it be, the earlier the better, but, certainly at age 55, you start thinking about that. That really becomes very helpful, because then from 55 to 65, you may be able to say, I got to save a little bit more, because if I truly want from 65 to 75, do a lot more traveling, then I have to find ways that I can save a little bit more. And as you mentioned, once you hit age 50, the IRS allows you to put a little extra into retirement plans. They call it the catch-up plans. So they're not very big, but they're helpful.
On one of them, I will say, on the 401k,
yeah, they are.
It is significant.
It is significant.
So that's the one to keep in mind, especially on the 401k topic, because I think if you're 55, let's face it, at 55, right, you're probably somewhere near peak income. Right, peak income is going to be somewhere between 45 and 55. In other words, you've learned all there is to know about what you're doing, right? And then we're barring people who have late stage misfortune, right? But for the most part, right, most people, 45 to 55, you've learned almost all there is to know in terms of experience in your position, and you've probably risen as far as you're going to go in terms of advancement, right? So peak income, they've studied this, peak income is probably somewhere between ages 40 and 55, right? In other words, the closer you get to retirement, assuming you don't get laid off or you don't get, at which point, you might have if they fire you because you're old, you might have a lawsuit there, right? Because you're not allowed to do that anymore, right? You can't just fire someone because they're 55, right? So a lot of times you're at peak income. If that's your case and you're like, oh man, I'm starting late, and you're seeing these limits, right? And you're saying, oh man, I can't catch up. There is the thing called the catch-up. And for instance, for the 401k catch-up this year is $7,500.
Wow, yeah.
So that's the difference between putting $23,000 a year into your 401k, which is the normal maximum, and $30,500, which is the catch-up maximum.
Exactly.
So you can make up time. The thing is, you got to know it. You have to know that you can do this. And yes, to catch up, you're going to have to put more than the match. In other words, if your employer is matching 3%, right, you're probably going to have to put more than 3% to catch up if you're only starting at 55, or if you were only putting 1% in the past, right? So the later you're starting, the more you're going to have to put in to catch up. The good news is, for most of these 52% of people that are starting at age 55, you are probably the person that's in the best position to be able to do that. You're probably at peak income, right? And you may be able to find some expenses to reduce, right? You're probably closer to having your home paid off, right? And that may be something where a financial plan can help you. In other words, if you're 50 to 55 and you're like, oh man, I want to get that next big home purchase because I just paid off this previous home, or I'm on the verge of paying off, you may need to, but you've only saved less than $250,000 in a 401k. That's where a financial plan can help you weigh that trade-off and say, would you prefer to stay in the home in which you live, maybe forestall that next big home purchase? You've paid off your mortgage. You now have a big gap between income and expenses, right? Should you now be really maximizing this 401k, and not maximizing the employer match, but I'm talking maximize that $30,500 a year that you can put in, because that's what's going to catch you up in 10 years. If you start at age 55 and put $5,000 a year, you're not going to catch up. You're not going to get to $250 in 10 years. But if you do $20,000, $30,000 into your savings, you will catch up quickly.
Sure, just putting 30,000 times 10 is 300,000, and with market growth, you're probably looking at 500,000.
Exactly,
right? So
and not only that, that's 30,000 that is coming out of your income. So at the point at which you're making maximum income and paying maximum tax rates,
right,
you're now sucking $30,000 out of that taxable income, and you may bump yourself to a lower tax rate at that point.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're in the 15% tax rate, you're not going to be able to save enough really to bump yourself down, right? The odds are you're not going to be able to put enough into a 401k to bump you to a lower tax rate. If you're making good money and you're at the point where you're at a 25, 26, 30% tax rate, putting $30,000 away could be the difference between bumping you to a lower tax rate.
Well, think about it. At 20%, you're saving yourself $6,000 in taxes, more or less. I mean, it's not exact, right? And at 30% tax bracket, you're saving yourself $9,000. That's money basically that you literally just, instead of putting the 30, right? If you saved 9, you only put 21. Because you would have paid the IRS.
You would have paid the 9 in taxes.
So you have to look at it that way.
So there are, it's not until you reach 55 and it's over. There are things that the IRS does that
allows you to do.
That allows you to catch
don't do
up.
anything.
Yeah, they're not giving you money, right? But they're allowing you to catch up with the recognition. Particularly if you're in a 401k. Unfortunately, if you're self-employed, your catch up is not quite as much. But particularly if you're in a 401k, that's a big catch up that you can take advantage of there.
No, I mean there are ways. I mean there are ways to do it. And again, the important thing is truly, go talk to a financial advisor and just see what and or if you have a good tax person. They may be able also to help, right? Because sometimes they are able to say, these are other ways that you can help save on your taxes. And those ways to save on taxes are really ways to save for your retirement also. So
exactly.
There's two avenues there that you can go. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, there's a couple challenges in doing that, one of which is inflation, which is definitely, I mean, we've seen some numbers on some articles on the way it's hitting people on the retirement phase of life, which is a challenge that definitely some people have to overcome.
Yeah. And it's the markets have become. It's interesting because the markets have become very, in my opinion at least, very myopic these days. And what I mean by that is that they have literally looked at only one thing recently, and that is, is the Fed going to lower interest rates, yes or not, right? And when it looks like they might lower interest rates, and the way that people assume they might lower interest rates if inflation begins to drop, right, the market enjoys that. If they look and say, there's no way that the Fed's going to lower rates this year, the market takes the other end. So the market's ignoring an enormous amount of things, right? But what can you do? A market's a market, right? And we can't,
exactly.
There's nothing we can do about that. But without any doubt, I think inflation is really, really a challenge now, the last few years in particular, and I think it's going to continue to be going forward.
So, because I think what people have to recognize that from a inflation rate perspective, we are not at peak inflation rate, right? Because it was 9% and now it's 3.4, right? But from a price level, this is every month brings new peak price level. In other words, a person looking at prices today versus where they were 2-3 years ago, right, is seeing prices higher than they have seen them in the last 3 years. Because exactly. It was 3.4% on top of 3.4%, on top of 6%, on top of 9%. So they've only been going up. So the fact that it's a
compounding effect, only it's against you.
It's against you, right? So in other words, yes, are we at peak inflation rate? No. But we are at peak price level. In other words, prices are higher now than they have been any time in the last 4 years.
Yeah, just because inflation went from 9% to 7% and now we're at 3.5%, it doesn't mean prices are going down. It just means that prices continue to go up, only it's a little slower than they were beforehand. But they continue to go up. And I think there was statistics that were asking people the impact of inflation, and this one was rather interesting. It said that 69% of Americans haven't been able to contribute as much to their savings due to ongoing inflation. 69%. I mean that's almost 3/4 of the country.
It's over 3/4.
Oh
no, almost 2/3.
So it's almost 3/4. Yeah, 3/4 of the country cannot do that, and that's a huge number, and you can understand that because if your salary is going up 1 to 2% per annum, right? or in some cases, some salaries don't go up, right? Then you sit there and go, and I'm paying every single time I go to the store, I'm paying more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And so what I used to be able to say, I can now save, that $100, $150 a month, I can no longer save that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a problem. That's a problem for folks because they're going to get to that age 65 and it's like, I cannot retire because I can't live on Social Security and I didn't save enough. And so that's the challenge going forward, right? And what was the other? And the other one was that 51% of people have taken on more debt.
Which is, I think that's the dirty little secret as to why consumer spending has been steady, why the economy has not essentially gone into recession, right? It's being buoyed by consumer spending, but it's being buoyed by consumer spending because people are spending money by taking on debt.
Yeah. And it's funny because I received a letter from a credit card company, right, in an announcement as to a change in their rate, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this is one of those, I'm not going to name who it was, but it's one of those kind of brands where you just kind of store things, right? It's not like a big Visa or MasterCard thing, right? But it said that the new rate's going to be, and I wrote down 34.5%, right? 34.5% interest, right? If you miss one interest payment, right, it jumps to 39%. Mm. So think about that. Think about 34 points. So if you don't pay off your bill at the end of that month, that 34.5% can be higher than what the minimum you paid. So you may have paid a minimum, you still have a balance,
which might be
higher now than it was before. Mm-hmm. And so this is the problem with credit card debt, is that the interest rates are so high that people never catch up. Mm-hmm. And the other number that I thought was very critical also is that 42% have withdrawn funds from their retirement savings because of inflation, right? So, those are three things that again, we have to, that the American people are struggling with, right? Is the fact that this continues to hit them in their pocketbook. Mm-hmm. And, it's just amazing that numbers come out and you get all this euphoria. It was only 3.4%, and I said to you can't be happy about that because the way I look at inflation is I want it to be at zero. I see no reason why inflation why should I be happy about anything except for zero? 0.1 means it's going up. Yeah. 0.2 means it's going up. 3.4, it's going up a lot. That's my opinion. 9% was ridiculous, right? But the point is that every time you have these numbers come in, right, it is not good for the majority of folks out there that work hard on a daily basis, right?
Yeah. And the funny thing is that the market would love lower interest rates because companies then borrow at low rates, buy their own stock, and make money. That's what they did in the 2010s, essentially, for a decade, right?
Yes.
But the issue is higher interest rates is also, ironically, the only thing that's probably keeping savers afloat at this point. I mean, if you're already in retirement, the fact that you could get 5.6, 5.7% in U.S. Treasury bonds, and that pushes up interest rates along the spectrum, it's probably the only thing keeping you afloat. Because if you were getting 0% interest on your bonds in retirement and you had inflation of 3.4, you'd basically be losing money.
Exactly.
Because once you're in retirement, you can't be invested in risky stocks trying to make capital gains, right? So the irony is that the very thing which the market is rooting against is the only thing keeping savers afloat right now, which is why, as hard as it is, right? I mean, we're not saying it's not hard to save given these numbers. You have to still try to save what you can because that's the only way you're going to be able to get out of this in the future. And it might mean going through some tough times in terms of amenities and discretionary spending, but it's the only way to avoid that 55 cliff because unfortunately, Xavier and I, you and I can't magically make inflation go away. So all we can tell people is you have to figure out a way to make it work despite inflation, because we can't, unfortunately, we could write Congress and say stop spending money, but it doesn't seem, I don't think we'd be the first to write that letter nor the last, and they don't seem to be listening too much.
No, I agree. There was one other piece of information that I thought, because people ask us all the time, is this the right time to invest? Is this the right time to invest, right? And we always have the same answer. In other words, I don't have a crystal ball, right? Now, Is the stock market at all-time highs? Yes. Are yield spreads at literally almost all-time lows? Yes. And yield spreads means that the difference between a treasury bond and all other risky bonds, right? So those spreads are very low, which means that, increasing the risk of your portfolio by going into riskier bonds, they're paying you less than they ever did before, right? So everything seems very expensive, right? So yes, there are ways to structure portfolios to minimize risk. But as far as investing is concerned, is the market going to continue to go up another 10% this year? Maybe. I don't know, right? Is it going to be up next year? Maybe. I don't know. The point is, to try to time it is not the right thing. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I also read was Bloomberg did an analysis, and there is $7 trillion of money in money market funds, right? And money market funds are very fungible. In other words, at the point people think, and the reason probably there's not much money is one, I'm sure there are some people on the sidelines, and two, they're probably earning between 4 and 4.5% in money market funds these days, so they're willing to park their money there, right? Mm-hmm. At the point that there's a comfort level in the marketplace, and maybe a year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years, I don't know when that would be, right? That money moves in. It's not a small amount. It's not the whole market, but it's not a small amount.
It's not negligible.
It's enough that will impact stocks for sure, right? Mm-hmm. So I tell people it's again, figure out what your goals are. Mm-hmm. Sort of figure out, your age is important. Your goals, your risk tolerance, and create the appropriate portfolio, right? That includes some stocks, some value stocks, growth stocks, small caps, some fixed income in the appropriate sectors, and then let it ride. And then as Alex said, if you can find your $50, $100 a month that you can go ahead and roll it over into your 401k or whatever retirement vehicle you can. Again, the beautiful thing about that is that every single time that they take the money out of your paycheck, you go into the market. So you're going to hit, if the market's down a little, you're buying lower. If the market's high, you're buying higher. But you're buying little by little without you even knowing it.
Mm-hmm. You're averaging yourself.
Exactly. And over time,
you're not worrying about, am I putting all my money in at the wrong time?
Exactly. So again, these are all, I guess it's our job to be nervous for our clients. It's our clients that sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully this has been helpful to people.
It's been helpful to me.
Bryson Lipstone, thanks so much for tuning in this morning. He says, I want to read his comment. You guys are great. Keep it up. Really appreciate you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Moneyto Miller watching the show this morning. Thanks for tuning in. One of our favorite viewers from Montana.
Absolutely.
And Elizabeth Urpí tuning in. Thanks so much for watching this morning. Always appreciate our great viewers. And they are fantastic, and we appreciate. And Kevin Higgins, great question. Thanks for bringing up the 403B. We do get that a lot because it can be all those jumbles of letters and numbers can be confusing.
And you never got a chance to talk about 457, but we can do that next time.
Oh, yeah, we do that next time. Basic thing, 457 usually doesn't have a match. It works the same way, but there's not usually a match. It's something on top of 401k. Yeah. So we can, but we'll put a note in to kind of review that next time. Absolutely. So this has been really...
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Always love talking about this, seeing how we can help people with just going through what are obviously questions that are out there and things that maybe people are nervous to ask or haven't thought to ask. So as always, be sure to send us, if you're like, oh man, I would love for you guys to cover this on a finance topic, please send us, don't hesitate to send us a message. You can do it on Facebook, because if you're watching, there's an Alexander Urpí, there's an Xavier Urpí, there's a Today Mañana. You can message us on Facebook.
Better off with Alex.
Well, if you message Xavier, Nick will read it. So absolutely, you can always contact us, Emergent Financial Services. It's emergentfs.com. Go on to there. There's a contact us form. Please don't feel like you can only send us a question there if you're like, oh man, I have a bunch of money to invest in Xavier now it's to help me. I mean, if you have a question, just
absolutely
put in the content. We will reach out to you and help answer the question. That's why we're in this business, right? That's why we have this show. So be sure to send us any questions, comments. Next week, great show lined up for people. Like I said, Matthias Yohn going to come on. and talk we'll talk some Spring, we'll talk some Charlottesville, we'll talk some another great investment, which is real estate. And then Veronica Pillar from Albemarle Ballet is going to come back on. She joined us, I think it was last year, Albemarle Ballet came out. So
that's right.
Albemarle Ballet coming back on, Veronica Pillar. We're looking forward to that. So it's going to be a great show next week. In the meantime, hope everyone is enjoying. It feels like the start of summer. I know it's not official.
It feels,
but
sort of
the
feels
warmer
like,
weather. We look forward to seeing you all then. Of course, thanks as always to Charlottesville Opera, to Matthias Realty, Craddock Serious Insurance, to our great presenter Emergent Financial Services, to Judah behind the camera. We made it easy on him today. He said no logins.
Yeah, exactly.
No
He had it
guests.
easy today. I don't. Hopefully, not complaining.
I don't think so. Not today. He's like, oh man, I didn't have to.
Yeah,
change
there are
it.
times where it's like, boy, oh boy.
Yeah,
It's
so he does great work behind the camera, especially if you see 2 or more guests.
Yeah,
he's putting
it's
the
a lot
work
of
in
work.
behind the camera. First, love the I Love CVille Network. We love all of you, our fantastic viewers. We look forward to seeing you next week. But until that time, as we like to close it out on the show, hasta mañana.